Hey, what's going on everyone? This is John J. Gaming on the mic, coming at you guys with a brand new episode of the ACSA here on Maximum Football 2020, and we are here as well with the preseason. We are going to unveil the preseason top 25 as well as go in depth with each conference in the ACSA as well. So again, it's going to be a really good one here for you guys here today, so make sure do me a favor and smash that like button as well as hit subscribe if you do happen to be brand new to the channel and like what you see as well. Let's go ahead and get into it, starting with the unveiling of the top 25 here in the ACSA going into season 2. Before I go much further into the preseason episode here today, I want to introduce you to another custom recruit I didn't get a chance to highlight in yesterday's ACSA recruiting special. We have Rigoberto Ramirez. He's going to be playing offensive lineman at South Alabama State. The true freshman was a number 4 overall rated prospect from last year's recruiting class and is a Pinot, California product. Could very well be starting at South Alabama State right away. We'll have to wait and see what he can do going forward. Another person that I want to talk about is Marquis Phelps from Deerfield, Illinois. He was named Ricky Harrison in the ACSA recruiting special, but I actually had the wrong name down, so that's actually my bad. But he is the number 100 rated prospect from last year's recruiting class and will be playing defensive back at the capital of Tennessee. We'll see how the number 100 rated prospect's collegiate career turns out here in the ACSA. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the top 25 preseason rankings here in season 2 of the ACSA and Maximum Football 2020. And one thing that you will notice is that these were also the final rankings for bowl week in the inaugural season of the ACSA, and it starts as it begins. Top 4, actually everything remains the same. Warwick will come in as the preseason number 1 team in the nation. I think that's fair, given that while they did lose in the national championship game, they were without their starting quarterback, Adrian Williams, who is one of the best players in the entire country, and still only lost by 10. They gave Capital of Tennessee a heck of a fight right to the end. Then at number 2, we have Lake Ozago, the Ironman representing the group of 5, and the question is, can they do it again? They certainly have an opportunity to do some things in the Rocky Mountain Conference. They are certainly favorites to win there. But if they can get back to the college football playoff and start a dynasty out there on the West Coast, that would be amazing to see. Number 3 is Capital Tennessee Bulldogs. They don't even need much introduction. They are your defending national champions. Then Seattle Cascades, after losing big in the college football playoff semifinals to the Warwick Rebels, they lost 38-3 when it's all said and done. Do they have what it takes to come back as well and remain competitive? We'll just have to wait and see. Then we have the rest of those top teams: Southern New Mexico, Oaksterdam, and we also have teams like Bluffton Tech and the Iroquois Nation, who are sitting there, and they were in a position to go to the college football playoff to the very end. Just some things didn't go their way for some of these teams. Actually, for Oaksterdam, Southern New Mexico, and Bluffton Tech, they all lost their conference championship games, and that cost them an opportunity to go to the playoff here in the first place. Meanwhile, for Iroquois, they didn't have things bounce their way. Even with a win against Bluffton Tech last season in the Big North Conference Championship, they did not move them ahead whatsoever. But this is the first portion of the top 25 preseason rankings here in the ACSA. Up next, we do have the next portion of the ACSA top 25, and headlining this group, we got some notable teams in here too. Sugar Land State and Texas Catholic come in at number 9 and number 10 in the nation. The Cowboys coming off a season where they win the Big Southwest Conference but lose the Texas Catholic in the Southern Bowl by a pretty considerable margin. One team to definitely watch out for in this group is the southeastern coast of Florida. They finished their season pretty darn strong. They went 10-2 in the regular season. And then what they also did was they gave Warwick a fight of their life in the Atlantic Shore Conference Championship game. They only lose that 31-22. And then on top of that as well, we also have this same team playing Alabama Hoover, and they beat Alabama Hoover in the League Qualler Bowl. You know, those Panthers, they are a squad that has one of the most talented teams on paper, you know, when it comes to talent. So it was a very impressive win for sure. Watch out for southeastern coast of Florida to make some serious noise this season. I can't wait to see what they can do. Meanwhile, Alabama Hoover, they get their starting quarterback back. Remember, in the second half of the season, their starting quarterback, Xavier Tobeck, was injured. And so backup quarterback had to play for half a season. And it didn't end very well, man. They lose conference championship game. They also lose their bowl game. So definitely not what they wanted to see towards the end of the year. But this is still a very good football team. I'm sure they're going to be back on a revenge tour as well. Rounding up this portion, we have Hayes College, which comes in ranked number 13 in the nation. They're coming off a Scout Scoops Bowl loss to the Amazon Delivery Boys, who come in ranked number 14 in the nation and have an opportunity to compete for that Big Pacific Conference Championship, because they could be a dark horse sitting behind Oaksterdam and Seattle. Number 15 and 16 is DeKalb A&M and Southfield. DeKalb A&M does concern me a little bit. They did not bring that good of a recruiting class in, and they kind of faded away in that second half of the season. We'll see what Season 2 has in store for the Barbs of DeKalb A&M. And then at 16, we do have Southfield, who is coming off a win in the Puerto Rico Bowl as well. Finally, to wrap up the ACSA Top 25 here in this preseason poll for Season 2, we start with Eastern Pennsylvania coming in ranked number 17 in the nation. They do end up beating Herbert Hoover in the Good Life Bowl in the previous season. They could be a dark horse as well. Watch out for Herbert Hoover. They were undefeated at one point before they played Warwick. They did also fade away a little bit to end the season, but this is still a very good football team that is still to be reckoned with. Following those two squads, we have Central Georgia A&M and Little Rock. Central Georgia A&M, you remember, started off as a preseason top 5 team, and then when they lost their game, they fell all the way outside the ACSA Top 25. And that being said, they had to really work hard to claw their way back here. They're back in the preseason top 25 once again, but can they get out to a better start of the season? Meanwhile, Little Rock is going to be dealing with bigger expectations here in Season 2, as this is a squad that was not ranked in the top 25 until they beat Alabama Hoover to open up conference week. It was a great win for Little Rock, but now they're going to have some expectations now. They're in the top 25 for the preseason. They come in ranked number 20 in the nation. How do the Yellow Jackets handle that? That will be, something to watch out for when it comes to this Little Rock squad. Virginia Christian, though, controversially maybe, are in the top 25 here once again, coming in ranked number 21 in the nation. They are, of course, the highest ranked team in the Sunshine Conference. They're going to have a tough non-conference schedule. That's just how it goes when you're a Sunshine Conference team. The Power 5 Conference always plays teams from the Group of 5 Conference in the ACSA for non-conference, to give some of these smaller schools a little bit more exposure at the beginning of the season. And, Virginia Christian, they're going to have a tough slate, and, if they can go 3-1 in that slate, that would be really good for them. But that being said, we'll just have to wait and see how they handle that. David Crockett, meanwhile, comes in ranked number 22 in the entire country. The Mavericks from the Big Southwest Conference, they lost their bowl game, part of a conference that goes 0-5 in bowl week, not counting Texas Catholic, who beat another Big Southwest Conference team. So, that being said, we'll see how David Crockett can do for sure. Rounding out the top 25, though, we got Detroit State, who comes in ranked number 23 in the nation, who beats Coastal Alabama in their bowl game, who comes in ranked number 24 in the country. And rounding up the top 25 preseason poll, we have Chattanooga Tech, just barely in the top 25. They now come in ranked 25 in the nation. So with all that being said, let's now get into the previews, go more in depth with each conference in the ACSA. So with that being said, let's now go into a deeper look into the Super South Conference, getting into Season 2 of the ACSA in Maximum Football 2020. And I'll say this, man, the Super South Conference, this is going to be one heck of a dogfight here once again, and it's showing that this is the best conference in all of college football. Forget about the actual preseason rankings for a split second. Even though Capital of Tennessee, the defending national champion, is in this conference, the recruiting rankings that they had, over the course as a whole in the conference, this is a very, very talented conference. They did very good recruiting wise as well, which shows how attractive this conference is overall to the top prospects in the country. 4 of the top 6, 5 of the top 6 recruiting classes are in the Super South Conference. The only exception is Bluffton Tech, and they had the 3rd best recruiting class. There were a bunch of other teams. We had, Little Rock. They had a top 15 class as well. On top of that, Mississippi A&M, they had a top 15 class. Chattanooga Tech had a top 15 class. Actually, Little Rock was 17, but still, you get the point. There's a lot of good recruits coming in, and it just shows how great this conference is. And likewise, one team that I am concerned about is Ceballo. Now, Ceballo, they had a really good season. They were even in the top 25. But compared to a lot of these recruiting classes, they did not bring in a lot of premium talent. Granted, they did bring in one Phil Steele top 100 prospect, coming in with a 36th ranked recruiting class overall. It's really difficult to compete in this conference, I will say that. So, that being said, who do I think is going to win this conference? I mean, you have to look at Capital Tennessee. I mean, they're defending national champions, and unless they're kicked off the pedestal, I still have them as the favorite. Even though there's a lot of great teams, there realistically are probably a good 5 teams in this conference that could very well win this thing overall. Central Georgia A&M's in this conversation, Alabama Hoover's in this conversation, South Alabama State and Coastal Alabama, I also believe, could be some dark horses as well, but if I had to pick, biggest dark horse, I think a lot of people are gravitating towards Alabama Hoover, but watch out for Central Georgia A&M. They can go in for that 2nd slot and potentially challenge for the Super South Conference Championship. Remember, this was a team that also finished strong. They brought in the 2nd best recruiting class in college football. They had 14 Phil Steele top 100 commits from the previous season. So they have reloaded extremely well. And it's going to be a great thing to watch. When you get into conference play, there's going to be a lot of top 25 matchups in here. I can sense it right now, and no reason why this is the first best conference in all of ACSA college football. Up next, in terms of conference previews, we'll now take a look at the Atlantic Shore Conference. And in the Atlantic Shore, man, they finished 3-4 in bowl games that did not include 2 teams from the same conference playing against each other. That does include Warwick, who did beat Seattle College in the college football semifinals, but lost to Capital of Tennessee in the ACSA National Championship game back in Season 1. For the Atlantic Shore Conference, man, I feel like there is only, there's Warwick, and then there's essentially everyone else. Warwick seems like they are in a class of their own right now. They were pretty much unopposed. They were, matter of fact, the only team in the ACSA to have an undefeated regular season. They ended up going 13-0 before they got into the college football playoff and finished the season 14-1. So, I mean, Warwick, they got some guys on that squad as well, and they also turned that around and got a top 10 recruiting class on top of that, including 4 top 100 commitments and 16 4-star guys, which is extremely impressive to do if I say so myself. But that being said, though, Southeastern Coast of Florida, watch out for them, man. Southeastern Coast, they finished the season extremely strong. They played Warwick extremely tough, and they even beat Alabama Hoover in the League Crawler Bowl. Both those matchups I mentioned, they were big underdogs, and while they didn't win both those games, they played tough in both those games and even got a win out of arguably one of the best rosters in the ACSA, top to bottom. So Southeastern Coast of Florida, while I don't necessarily think this is the year that they do end up beating Warwick in a conference championship game situation, I do, however, think that this is one of those things where they have an opportunity to close the gap this season. They could bring in another good recruiting class because of it, and then maybe in season 3 we see Southeastern Coast of Florida overtake Warwick. As for the Rebels, man, you know, time is now, man. You gotta make it happen here for sure. But other than that, you know, I think other than Southeastern Coast of Florida, none of these other teams can really go in and challenge what they're trying to go ahead and accomplish. Delaware of Kent, you know, they're a solid team, and I think the same for, you know, like a Herbert Hoover, you know, Florida Tech. You know, this is not a great conference at the top. There's a solid middle class, don't get me wrong, but, you know, other Warwick and Southeastern Coast of Florida, the, you know, top 3 or 4 teams in this conference, it's certainly a little bit shaky, and I would be shocked if they only, they don't have very many top 25 ranked teams at the end of the season. Following the Atlantic Shore Conference, we have the Big North Conference up next. And this might be the best conference in college football outside of the Atlantic Shore. The Big North, they had a 4-2 bowl record, which does not include the 2 games where they had 2 teams from the same conference play against each other. The only difference was that they did not have a team make it to the college football playoff in the previous season because Iroquois essentially played spoiler for Bluffton Tech. But I think for Bluffton Tech, though, this is, you know, this is their conference to lose, I think, for the most part. Although, you know, it's going to be a little bit more difficult this time around. That being said, though, Bluffton Tech, they looked like the best team last season before that conference championship game. And, you know, they took some couple of questionable losses towards the end. But that being said, you know, I think Bluffton Tech is still the best team in this conference, you know, and it showed in the Phenom Elite Bowl when they played that same team from the Big North Conference Championship game, who played in the Phenom Elite Bowl as well. And it really did turn out that Bluffton Tech, you know, they wiped the floor with the Iroquois, and, you know, Bluffton Tech, you know, they're going to make their way back. However, I will say one dark horse to look out for is Hawassa College. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hawassa College, they were a little shaky down the stretch. They did lose in the PX1 Sports Bowl. But if you take a look at the losses that they had, all of their losses were pretty close. A lot of one-possession losses. So this was a team that, you know, maybe in some of those bigger games, they might have had a more difficult time closing. But, you know, they were all very close games. It could have went either way. It was also a situation where Hawassa was in a position to, you know, make some serious noise themselves at one point. So I think Hawassa College, I think they have a little bit of return to the mean when it comes to their one-possession games. And they end up going ahead and, you know, making a huge improvement from year 1 to year 2. Matter of fact, I think that Hawassa College could potentially make it to the championship game against Bluffton Tech. I could go on the record saying that here, that they could be that team. Now, Hawassa, however, there are a few other teams that I feel could make some noise in the Big North Conference Championship game and go to the conference championship.
a few of those teams in the same tier. Got Southfield, Detroit State, Iowa Tech, and Indiana Formtown. I feel like is in that same tier, that second tier below, maybe a Bluffton Tech, as well, in that same tier with Hawatha. Southfield and Detroit State, they both win their bowl games, pretty notable bowl games as well. Southfield defeats DeKalb A&M in the Puerto Rico Bowl to end the season, and Detroit State, they take care of Coastal Alabama, who you could make the argument Coastal Alabama wasn't motivated to play in their bowl game. They had one of the better rosters and was expected to compete for the opportunity to go to the college football playoff, but they had a really disappointing year. But Detroit State's a pretty solid squad. And Iowa Tech, now I know Iowa Tech finished 7-5 back in season 1, but they had one of the most difficult schedules in the ACSA. It seems like almost every week they were playing a top 25 squad, especially in conference play. So it was a brutal stretch for Iowa Tech. And Indiana Formtown as well, they faded down the stretch as well, but they changed some things on their offensive side of the ball. So I think they get back to a position where they can also, compete in that upper echelon of the Big North Conference. Now, I did also fail to mention, the University of Iroquois. I did not mention them, and I know you're thinking why I didn't. Now, the Iroquois, they had a great season. However, there was a lot of older players that were on that squad. They graduated quite a few guys, so there's going to be a lot of new faces on that Iroquois team. And I think while they're trying to go out and figure things out, I think that the University of Iroquois, they're going to take a serious step back here between season 1 and season 2. That being said, I mean, this is still a solid team, I think, and I think the University of Iroquois, they still make it to a bowl game. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think this is a team that, is a dark horse to go to college football playoffs towards the end of last season, as it is for this season. I don't see that in this roster. So the Iroquois, I think they still make it to a bowl game, but that being said, I don't think that they finish this season in the top 25. I just don't see it, and I feel like this is a mid-pack Big North team this season. So we'll see what happens in the Big North. Definitely quite a few things to watch out for. So now we go to the Big Southwest Conference, and you want to talk about major embarrassments over the course of the ACSA bowl season back in season 1. This was a conference, the only bowl win from this conference was Texas Catholic when they beat fellow conference opponent Sugar Land State in the Soden Bowl. Now, when it comes to, their bowl record against teams outside of the Big Southwest Conference, they were 0-5. So they got teams in, don't get me wrong, 7 out of the 10 teams in this conference did end up going to a bowl game, but they did not do well when it comes into bowl season. So I think they're really going to get a black eye for that, because remember, this ACSA playoff committee is, they have a very short memory, and if it's close between them and another team from another conference for maybe one of these last spots to get into the college football playoff, I feel like they're gonna choose another team from another conference if it's close, because they have, most of these conferences have a better resume as a conference than what the Big Southwest Conference did, and that's, going to be really disappointing. Now, I think a couple of teams that could make it is Texas Catholic and Southern New Mexico. Southern New Mexico, I'm kind of concerned about because they lose big to Sugar Land State, 54-15 in the conference championship game, and then went to go to the California Classic Bowl and then lose to Oaksterdam, who is also their second best team in the Big Pacific Conference, 13-9. Texas Catholic, man, they might have the best chance to make it to the playoff, but that being said, can they stay consistent? Consistency was kind of a problem for them last season. I think they're capable of pulling it off, but we have to wait and see if they can do it over the course of an entire season. So that being said, I think Southern New Mexico and Texas Catholic, I think they meet for conference championship this season. But if you want to talk about dark horses, maybe David Crockett. I know they lost in the they lost a bowl game to, I think it's the PlaybookSocial.com Bowl, to Virginia Christian from the Sunshine Conference. But that being said, you know, in terms of state of the conference, you know, Big Southwest, it's not looking too great right now. I know Sugar Land State had a really good season last season, but they had several starters on the defensive side of the ball last year graduate. So, and you gotta remember, like, the inconsistency of that defense. Remember, this was a team that gave up 60 points. You heard me. 60 points to Nazareth, who didn't even make it to a bowl game at the end of the season. And, you know, they have new faces, so backups from last year's defense are now starting, and this is the same defense that, you know, didn't necessarily play well. So I know Jonathan Cooper, you know, he's going to be back, and he has some weapons to work with on the offensive side of the ball, but I do think Sugar Land State takes a step back this season. Maybe they finish in, you know, 4th, 5th place in the Big Southwest Conference. They still go bowling, but it will not be as nice of a bowl game as the Soden Bowl appearance that they made in the previous season. Up next now, we have the Big Pacific Conference here in the ACSA. And the Big Pacific Conference, man, you know, they didn't get a lot of love in the last year's preseason poll. They only had one team in the ACSA Top 25, but this year it's looking a lot better for them. Seattle College starts out ranked number 4 in the nation. Oaksterdam comes in ranked number 6 in the entire country. Amazon Delivery Boys, they even come in ranked number 14. So, all things considered, they are doing a lot better than what they were at this point. But, you know, from a recruiting standpoint, they still have a long way to go. They did not have anybody with a top 10 recruiting class in this in the recruiting rankings. Actually, matter of fact, the best recruiting class that was put together this year was actually California Calabasas, who had the 12th best recruiting class in all of college football. Now, that being said, though, speaking of them, I really do think they are a dark horse to watch out for this season. California Calabasas, man, they quietly had a very quality year. They ended up going 9-3. They did lose to Mississippi A&M in the Ryan Moody Bowl in the previous season, but California Calabasas quietly is a very good team to watch out for, and they could potentially win the Big Pacific Conference when it's all said and done. Because when I look at, you know, Seattle College, you know, that wasn't a very good roster on paper, but they were able to put together a very magical run and, you know, played pretty flawless throughout the year, you know, and they were able to make it to the college football playoff despite the fact that they only had, like, what, a 79 overall team, which is not very high whatsoever, you know, at least for a Power 5 school. So the fact that not only did they get to go to a bowl game, but they also ended up going to, you know, have an opportunity to play for the national championship, they definitely overachieved, and I think Seattle College is going to take a step back. Granted, they did sign a top 20 class themselves. As for Oaksterdam, I just think they got really lucky over the course of last year too. You know, their offense wasn't really there. Their defense really had to carry them for a lot of the year. Matter of fact, a lot of the games that we ended up watching for these guys, they had to play, you know, very ugly games, you know, in order to win. If it was a 2-score game that Oaksterdam was down by, most of the time, you know, they could not come back from that. You know, I think to a Seattle College regular season game, Big Pacific Conference Championship game, you know, that was an ugly one. They ended up losing, what, 15-16. So I think how Hawaiian kind of got screwed over in one-possession games last season, I think the opposite happens to Oaksterdam, where they were really fortunate in their very close games, and I think they kind of take a return back to the mean as well, and Oaksterdam takes a step back as well. Granted, it's still a very good team that could still make it to a bowl game, you know, but they're probably not going to be competitive for the the college football playoff or any of these major bowl games. And frankly, I don't see anyone from the Big Pacific Conference making it to the national championship game like I did last season, but I have been proven wrong before. Seattle College, I was down on them in season 1, and look what they ended up doing. Maybe something like that happens again. We'll just have to wait and see, but watch out for UCC though. I think they can very well win this conference when it's all said and done. So now we start getting into the group of 5 conferences that we do have here in the ACSA. And to start things out, we do have the National Athletic Conference. Now, the National Conference, if you guys remember, they had the first group of 5 team that was ranked in the top 25 at one point, the Clinton Knights, located in New York. They actually, had something very good going on. They, were media darlings in the first half of the season. Now, they did fall off and they didn't make it to a bowl game, but shows how capable this conference is top to bottom, with the exception of maybe South Bend Tech, who didn't win a single game this past season. But that being said, though, this is going to be a very interesting conference to watch out for. Alfred Tech, will be back as the usual suspect. I think they are favorites to win this conference again this season. They finished tough against Alfred the Great. They won that game in overtime. They really showed their wit. And then on top of that, they also played really well in the PX1 Sports Bowl against Hawatha. Another close, tight game that they found a way to win despite not being as talented as a team as Hawatha College is. But the question for them is not if they can win this conference. Can they crack into the top 25? They do, of course, have a tougher non-conference slate, being that they are in a group of 5 conference. But that being said, though, if they finish 3-1 and, do really well in National Athletic Conference play, I can certainly see a route, similar to what like Ozago did, that actually took them into the college football playoff at the end of the season. And I can see the same thing happening for, same route as Virginia Christian, who was able to crack into the top 25 at the end of the season. So, and they also brought in a top 25 class as well, which is going to really help bolster that roster in terms of depth. So I see Alfred Tech, going, to win this conference, I think, and then also cracking to the top 25 on top of that as well going forward. And one thing for sure is this is an underrated conference. Yes, they only had 3 bowl teams from this past season, but they were 2-1 in bowl season. Burlington, they couldn't win their bowl game, but this is still a very good team, or a very good conference, I should say. But also check out for Vienna. I think Vienna could potentially win this conference as well. They looked very good towards the end and could make a run at that top 25. University of Burlington will certainly still be in the picture as well. They made it into the Wild West Barbecue Shack Bowl in the previous season. And St. John Jakes was able to put together a pretty good class, and I think they finished at around 6-6 as well. They were just short of, not being able to go to the playoff, or not playoff, but, go to postseason play, that is the bowl games. I think St. John Jakes has a resurgence as well, and we could easily see, 4 teams again, make it into bowl season here in the National Athletic Conference here at the end of the day. Now, that being said, though, we can't talk the group of 5 without talking about this Rocky Mountain Conference, and specifically Lake Ozago. You guys already know Lake Ozago, the only group of 5 team to make it to the college football playoff, and represented pretty well for the group of 5. Yes, they lose to Capital Tennessee, but they only lose by a field goal, and not to mention, they end up losing to the national champion, in the first place. So, Lake Ozago, no shame in losing in the college football semifinals, to a team that does end up winning in the national championship game. And, that being said, I talked about how in the Atlantic Shore preview, it's kind of Warwick and everybody else. In Lake Ozago, not only is it this team and then the rest of the conference, that gap between Lake Ozago and the rest of the conference is wider than it is for Warwick and the rest of their conference over in the Atlantic Shore. Now, Lake Ozago, not only did they did really well on the field, they ended up with an 11-1 regular season record, won their conference championship game, lost narrowly in the semifinals, so they ended up finishing 12-2 overall. But you know, they also were the only Rocky Mountain team that had a top 25 recruiting class. Lake Ozago was able to translate that into great recruiting results. They ended up with a top 10 recruiting class, and you know, doing so with 3 top 100 prospects, and had the 9th best recruiting class. Now, the next best recruiting class in the Rocky Mountain Conference is George Fox Eugene, who had the 50th best recruiting class. So there is quite a gap between what Lake Ozago is bringing in terms of talent and what all of these other teams are doing in terms of their talent levels as well. So, you know, I think the question for Lake Ozago is, you know, not if they could win their conference. I think it would actually be shocking to me if Lake Ozago ends up not winning their conference this season. I think the question is going to be, you know, can they make it back to the college football playoff? You know, it really depends on their non-conference slate. If they can finish 3-1 in non-conference play like they did last season, I certainly think there's a chance for them to come back, you know, as long as they don't have any setbacks in Rocky Mountain Conference play. Now, another question is who is going to end up facing them. Now, last year it was Pacific Tech. They finished 7-5 in the regular season. They lose, and they did not get the opportunity to go to a conference championship game. I think this year is potentially different. George Fox, you know, they seem to be really improved from season 2, and Pacific Tech's consistency is a little bit of a concern. Going into season 1, I thought they were going to be the conference champions, but they just were too inconsistent, and I think that bites them even more in season 2, because it's no longer disputed that on paper they're the most talented team. So I think Pacific Tech, they don't make a conference championship appearance this season. I think it's George Fox that ends up getting the job done. But can they get more than one team into bowl play this year? Obviously, Lake Ozago is a great standard bearer for the rest of his conference, but that being said, George Fox, you know, they got to make an appearance this season, and I think Pacific Tech got to try to get in there as well, you know, because they're the only 2 teams with, you know, that finish in the top half of recruiting. So, I mean, 3 teams is still not great, but that would be a much better year overall for the Rocky Mountain. Next conference that we do have on deck is the Stars and Stripes Conference here in the ACSA. Stars and Stripes Conference, that was another, you know, conference in the group of 5 that surprisingly did well in ACSA bowl season. Back in season 1, they ended up with a 2-1 bowl record. Darden and Oxford both winning their bowl games, and Spring Creek, you know, they gave Indiana 4 in a game. A very entertaining, high-scoring game as well. They ended up losing by a final score of 42-58. You know, so definitely a shootout here. But I think Spring Creek, they used that bowl game loss as a learning experience. They turn around and get a top 25 recruiting class, you know, and they're the defending champions of the Stars and Stripes Conference as well. And the gap seems a little bit wider this year compared to it was the last year. Granted, I still think Darden and Oxford are going to, you know, duke it out again this year for that second spot in the Stars and Stripes Conference Championship game. But that being said, though, it seems like Spring Creek seems like a bigger favorite to win the conference this season. And the question for them is, can they also crack it to the top 25? If they can manage to do that, they will be the first Stars and Stripes team in the ACSA Dynasty to make it into the top 25. You know, again, for Spring Creek, it really depends on if they can do well in non-conference play. Again, a 3-1 or even 2-2 kind of slate can get them in right into the top 25 late this year, but we'll just have to wait and see, and if it holds up, as well as if there could be a 4th team that, you know, could be a player in the Stars and Stripes Conference race, and see if the conference in general gets more than 3 teams in the bowl season this year. On deck now, we have the Midwest Athletic Conference, and I'll have to say to you guys up front, this might be the worst conference in all of ACSA and college football. And the reason I say that, it's 2 particular reasons, but, you know, the first and foremost, you know, this was a conference that did not have a single bowl team last season. And that was particularly because, none of the teams in their Midwest Conference champion, they had one team that had 8 wins. That was Kearney College. But, nobody else. Central Tech had 7 wins. And I think Central Tech and Kearney College might be the only 2 teams in the Midwest that had a winning record or, finished better than 6-6. So, definitely some concerning stuff here for sure. But not only that, but also the recruiting not good in the Midwest. The best recruiting class is Central Tech, and they finished 65th, which is barely in the upper half of the ACSA. They're like sitting right in the middle. Kearney College is the 69th best recruiting class. Nice. But that being said, this is not a good conference, and it doesn't really matter who wins. My question is, can they get somebody to bowl season? Because as we've seen, from year 1 of the ACSA bowl year, we now know that winning your conference does not guarantee you an appearance into bowl season. They look at the entire body of work to make sure that the best team possible is out there. And if there's nobody meets that criteria in the conference, it doesn't matter. You don't get in. That's just plain and simple. Now, I think, it could be Central Tech and, Kearney College, duking it out once again for the Midwest Conference Championship. But I think a dark horse in this conference, maybe UW-Kennesaw. They put together a decent recruiting class, and they played a lot better in the second half of the season than they did back in the first half. So maybe they can take that momentum as well. But the question for the Midwest Conference, can they get a team into bowl season? That's what I want to see from this conference, and we'll have to wait and see if they actually go about doing that. And for the final conference, and we'll get a little bit more of an in-depth preview going into Season 2, we now have the Sunshine Conference here in the ACSA. And for the Sunshine, it's a slightly better version of the Midwest Conference. The Sunshine Conference also had a conference champion in the Northern Virginia Angels that did not get an opportunity to go to a bowl game once again, despite the fact that they did finish 8-5. The only difference between the Sunshine and the Midwest Conference is that Virginia Christian did finish in the top 25 despite losing their conference championship game. Now they did recover, beat David Crockett in the PlaybookSocial.com Bowl versus David Crockett. And I will have to say, the question for Virginia Christian, because I think they are actually the favorite to win this conference again this season. Can they remain in the top 25? They start off this season ranked number 21 in the preseason poll. Can they maintain that? It really, it depends again, like on this non-conference slate. 3-1 or better. That's what you got to do when you're a smaller conference team. We now see that, 9-3 or better, can get you into the top 25. Just got to stay patient with it overall. But, who's going to challenge? Northern Virginia could play in a role once again, in terms of challenging Virginia Christian. But a team that's not really getting much talk necessarily is Virginia Coastal. Virginia Coastal they had a pretty decent recruiting class. They finished with the 60, actually tied for the 66th best recruiting class. I think they finished, due to benefit of the doubt, they were ranked at number 67 for this season. And, I gotta say, Virginia Coastal, they could potentially compete in the Sunshine Conference Championship game as well. It'll be interesting to see whether it be them or Northern Virginia. I feel like Virginia Christian is locked in, but, it's between those two ultimately who goes to that Sunshine Conference Championship game at the very end of the season. And can we see more than one bowl team from this conference as well? We've seen Virginia Christian, they're able to make it to a bowl game despite losing their conference championship game. Can this conference garner more respect since they did, finish 1-0 as a conference? We'll have to wait and see.
Alright everyone, so we made it through the preseason top 25, and then we also went depth with each conference here in the ACSA. And the only thing that is going to be left to do now is go ahead and take a look at the games that will be played here in this opening week here in Season 2 of the ACSA on Maximum Football 2020. Starting with our first set of games, this will be part 1 for the ACSA, and the first game that I want to go ahead and drop is this matchup between the Iroquois Eagles, the defending Big North Conference champions, coming in ranked number 8 in the nation. They're going to play host to Minnesota State in the Twin Cities, home of the Beavers. They're representing the Midwest Conference. This will be the very first matchup shown here on the channel to start Season 2. After that, we will have another matchup between the Midwest Conference and the Big North. We have the Bluffton Tech Fighting Muskrats, who are going to go ahead and play against the South Idaho State Ranchers. Bluffton Tech winning the Phenom Elite Bowl last season, and will look to build upon that, see if they can be a new incoming team in the college football playoff. This will be the second game of part 1. And finally, to wrap up part 1 of week 2, we'll have Alfred the Great, who did go to the National Athletic Conference Championship game in the previous season. They will play against the Sugar Land State Cowboys, who are the defending champions of the Big Southwest Conference here in Maximum Football 2020. They did not win their bowl game, but still getting a top 10 preseason ranking. They got some expectations on their hands as well. This is the final game of part 1. Then we have part 2 of week 1 season 2, where we'll have the Treytown Lions representing the Midwest Conference as well. They go on the road to play against the 5th best team in the ACSA, in the Southern New Mexico Cougars. They had an opportunity to go to the college football playoff, but they lose their conference championship game to Sugar Land State, and then they also lose their bowl game to Oaksterdam to end the season. So they're on a 2-game losing streak, so look for Southern New Mexico to start this season, this revenge tour on the Treytown Lions. After that, speaking of other teams in the Big Southwest, we have Texas Catholic playing against Louisiana Central Black Bears. Texas Catholic ranked number 10 in the nation and winners of the Stoughton Bowl in the previous season. Texas Catholic looks to get off on a good start against the Black Bears of Louisiana Central, the final game of part 2. For part 3, we do have 3 more games that will be shown to you guys. We have the Seattle Cascades, who did make it to the college football playoff last season. They will start the year off hosting the Hawaii State Roughwaves from the aforementioned Rocky Mountain Conference. Should be a good one to start part 3. See a good measuring stick game for the Hawaii State Roughwaves. After that, we'll get a look at the defending champions in the capital of Tennessee, Bulldogs. They will be playing against the Spring Creek Moose, who are the champions of the Stars and Stripes Conference. Big game for both teams. You know, good non-conference, actually a little bit of a underrated non-conference matchup. Spring Creek will certainly have their hands full with the defending national champions. We'll see what Spring Creek can do against the best that ACSA does have to offer. Capital Tennessee coming in ranked number 3 in the nation in the preseason poll. Then the final game of part 3, we'll have the number 1 preseason team in the nation, the Warwick Rebels. They will go and play against the Las Vegas Aces in the Stars and Stripes Conference. The Las Vegas Aces did not finish above 500 in the previous season, but a good test for Las Vegas to begin the season. Now, one more game that I do want to mention on Saturday. This will be the ACSA Game of the Week, the only top 25 matchup on the docket. We have the number 21 ranked Virginia Christian Saints take on number 12 Alabama Hoover. A great matchup as Virginia Christian is the best that the Sunshine Conference has to offer. They're going to take on one of the best teams in the Super South. Good matchup here for both squads. We'll see what both teams are made of here. As that will wrap up today's ACSA preseason episode. If you are excited for Season 2 of the ACSA here on Maximum Football 2020, do me a favor and please smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you're new. This is John J. Gaming on the mic signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a wonderful day. Take care, everybody.